Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. Okay, and what I want to talk about today is basically how to create a hamburger menu in pure CSS, so no JavaScript involved. So I've done hamburger menus videos in the past that used JavaScript, but how could I do it in just CSS? Okay, so let's just do an example. We'll just create a CSS file. So new file, create an index.html. Okay, I'll use Emmet to generate the HTML boilerplate. And we'll just do the CSS in this file. So I'm going to set up a style tag for setting up the CSS. Okay. And now imagine that we have our menu at the top. And let's actually open this up with live server so that way we can see it as it updates. Okay, so there's the page. So let's say we have our header of our page. Header. And at the top, we're going to have like an H1. Actually, let's do it this way. We'll say h1.title. Okay, and this title will be like my page. Okay, and then we're going to have a nav tag. That's going to represent our navigation. And then basically in our navigation, we will have sort of two divs. Okay, so we're going to have one div that equals hamburger, and another div that equals links. Okay, and then inside the div of links, we're gonna have a div with a class of link because it's one individual link, and we're gonna have 5 of those. Okay, and there we have 5 links, and we'll just put some text in there. Link. Let me just edit the other ones. Link. Okay, so right now you see sort of like those links right there. Okay, and then in this div, we're gonna have 3 subdivs. So we're gonna have div dot, and these are gonna represent the lines of a hamburger, which we'll see in a moment. Okay, and I want 3 of those. Cool. Actually, let me think about that. Hamburger, yes. So then actually I want these 3 lines to be inside of a label. Okay. And the label is going to be for. So for basically allows you to attach a label or link a label to an input element. So we're going to say for Hamburg. Okay, and we want those divs inside that label because essentially these are the lines that represent the hamburger menu. And then we're going to want an input, okay, which has a name of hamburger. Okay, which is going to be a type of checkbox. And just in case, we'll put an ID of hamburger. I always forget that if like that for attaches itself to the name of the input or the ID of the input. So hamburger. Okay. So essentially there you see the checkbox. Okay. Which is eventually going to disappear. So the idea is that the checkbox has 2 unique states, right? It has unchecked and checked. And that checked state is something that we can refer to in CSS. We can actually style something based on whether an element is an input is checked. So we're going to take advantage of that. So that way that allows us to kind of capture a click in CSS because we can say, hey, style this when this is checked. Okay, so that's going to be sort of the thing we take advantage of. Okay. So bottom line is, let's first just make the links look like more like a little like side menu, like it would be on a mobile page. Okay. Cool. So let's see here, and the links are, it's going to be a class called links, and we're going to say that the links, so that's a div that has all the links inside of it, is going to have a width of, let's say, 30% of the screen. Okay, it's going to have a color of brown, just so that way it's nice and visible. Okay, although I wanted a background color. of brown. There we go. That looks a little ugly, so let's put some padding in there. Padding, we'll say 4 pixels. Okay, that looks a little bit nicer. Now the font color we'll make white, so that way the text is a little bit easier to read. Okay, and we want to position that on the opposite side of the screen. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to give it a position of fixed, which means we can specify exactly where it is. Okay, and we're going to say that this menu, okay, by default is going to basically be, by default we want it off the page. So basically we're going to say right. So that means starting from the right of the page, we're going to say -100. So technically it's going to be right off the page, off to the right. Okay, although that didn't quite, let me think about that, right. -100. And then actually I want to also make sure it's top. Oh, actually I know why. I think I want to change this to absolute. Okay. No, fixed works. So top, I want 0. Okay. I think it's supposed to be 0 pixels. 0 pixels. And there you go. So you see, like, now that link is off there. Now it's a little too thick, so I want to put that a little bit further away. So we'll say 200 pixels. So that way it's off the page. So right now it's not visible. Okay. Although I do want it to slide back in. Okay. So when it does become visible, it's going to animate back to where it should be on the right. And I want to do it sort of in a more graceful way. So we're going to say transition, because that allows you to take, hey, when something changes. And actually what we'll do is I'll do it without the transition first, so you can kind of see the effect and what the transition will do. Okay. Because it's best if you see it without the transition, so you can see what the effect of the transition is. Okay, so that link bar is kind of there. And again, we can make it prettier and style it more, but that's not the point of this. The point here is to show you the mechanism. Okay, now I want those hamburger lines. So I want these 3 divs to look like 3 lines that are on top of each other. So first let's actually like target each line, dot line, and make them like a dark line. So we'll say, hey, they have a width of, let's say, 5 pixels. So it's a really small div. Okay. There's no content inside of them, so they don't really take up much of any space. And then what we're going to do is give them a border of 3 pixels. We'll say 2 pixels solid black. Okay, so right now you have like 3 divs stacked on top of each other. And we want to give them just the tiniest bit of margin. We'll say margin 1 pixel. Okay, so we're trying to get that hamburger effect, but not quite the way I want it yet. We maybe want to give it a little bit more margin, so 3 pixels. Yep. And we might want to give it a little bit more length or width. So we'll say 20 pixels. Okay, so see, that's starting to look like a hamburger menu. Okay, cool. Nice. Okay, so now this looks like a hamburger menu, but technically what we want to do is we want this kind of positioned at the top. Okay, so we're going to say we want to put this, so we're also going to say position fixed. And then we're going to position this at the top. 0. Actually, no, we don't want to position the lines there. We want to position where the lines are in, which is technically this hamburger class. So I'm going to style that and position that up at the top. Okay, and we're going to sit there and say position fixed top 0 right 0. Okay, and you see now it's up there at the top. Maybe we want to give it just like a little bit more space. So we'll say, 5 pixels, 5 pixels. Just to give it a little cushion. Okay, but you see that checkbox is now visible. Okay, and we'll remove the checkbox in a moment. Okay, but now let's make that menu reappear. So what I can do is I can target things that are adjacent to each other. So basically, this input, okay, can be checked. Okay, so let me think here. So right now, Is that adjacent? So let's see here. Right. Basically, we want that input to be adjacent to our links. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to reposition the links inside the Hamburger div, because what it needs to do, it needs to be adjacent to that input. And you'll see why in a moment. So let me save this. Okay. Because what I want to do is I want to say, hey, if, again, we have that input of Hamburg. Okay, so we see we have that input of Hamburg. So we'll say Hamburg, because it has an ID of Hamburg. So actually we should do Hamburg. And if that element that has the ID of Hamburg is also checked, okay, so it's checked, then I want to also target any adjacent. So the plus sign is going to be like, hey, is there something next to it? I want to target, a div with a class of links. Okay, so if there's a div with a class of links that's adjacent to that checked Hamburg, what I do is I want to change how it's styled. And the main thing I want to change is I want to say, hey, instead of just being right -200, I want it to be right 0. Okay, so bring it back to where it is. Okay, so again, when I check this box, that should pop back in. And there it is. Okay, but right now that Hamburger is disappearing because it's being covered by the box. Okay, so let me refresh the page. Okay. Cool. So in that case, I'm probably going to want to move. One, I want to get rid of this checkbox so it's not visible. See, if I click on the 3 lines, it still has the same effect. Because if you click on a label, it counts as a click on the input is associated with. So since I put this 4 on the input, so again, for the label, so we have the label here, and it's for Hamburg, it's linked to this input. Okay, so we're creating that association. The problem is, like right now, once I do that, the thing gets covered up. So there's a couple different ways I can deal with that. Okay, so we can change the Z index of Hamburger so that way it stays on top. The higher the number, the higher layer should be. So by default, everything is 0. So if I change this to 1, what happens if I click on this? It's still on top. Okay, and again, that's Hamburger. Well, that's the whole div. Okay, so really we want just the... Oops, got a little bit of a cough there. Okay, Hamburg. Yeah, so that'd be that whole div, and that whole thing's included in there. So we really want to target the Hamburg section. So we want to target that label. We want to make sure that label is visible. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll target the label. Okay, that has a attribute of 4 equals Hamburg. So I'm going to target that label so that way it stays on top. And then we're going to give that a Z index of 1. Okay, because what that's going to do is that it should keep the 3 lines on top. So if I click on the 3 lines, it still doesn't quite show up on top. So let me just take a look here. Shift I. Let's open up DevTools. Let's examine. Okay. Erg. So the input's there, and the label is here. Position static. Try setting the position as something other than static. Oh, okay. So we got to set the position to something else. So we got to set the position for the label to absolute. And that should allow the 1 yes. Okay. Now basically what it did is because I changed the positioning, it treats it as like layers. So you just put the 3 lines on top of the checkbox, which is fine for now. We're going to get rid of the checkbox anyways. But if I click on that, see now it stays on top because I can use the Z index if the position is like fixed or absolute, meaning basically I am saying where things are located. So there, now it's visible there. Okay. That kind of works for me. Probably want to move those lines a little bit different. So position the hamburger over here, top right. No, that's not the hamburger. Top right. That's only just because basically now this has a separate positioning. So I got to do this. We're gonna say right 5 pixels, and that should move the hamburger a little bit to the right. Perfect. Perfect. Okay, now that we don't need the checkbox being visible. So what we're going to do is we're going to target that checkbox, which again is the element that has the ID of Hamburg. And basically we can just say, hey, visibility is hidden. Okay, so that way it's still technically there, it's just not visible. Okay, and now we have this little menu that can pop out. Okay, but you see it just pops out. It's not like the most attractive pop out. Okay, we want to make it like slide out. So this is where that transition is going to come in. So we're going to go to the actual box of links, and we're going to say, hey, whenever the right property, like that where it exists on the right, is changed, we want it to transition, which means we want it to gradually change. So I'm going to say, hey, whenever the right value changes, I want you to make that change over 3 seconds. Not 3 seconds, 0.3 seconds. Okay, so now what's going to happen is that when this kicks in and changes that value, instead of it immediately just switching it like a light switch, it's going to gradually change it. So watch what happens. See, now it has like a little bit more of a pop. Again, I can adjust that speed over here in that transition property to make it maybe, let's say, 0.8 seconds. Maybe that's a little bit better. Yeah, so maybe a little bit faster than that. So we'll say 0.6. Okay, so that's kind of getting a little bit better, and you can kind of, get it to where you want it. And then you have like a menu, okay? Now, what would happen is that this is technically not what I would want once the screen gets big enough. Like, okay, when you get on a tablet or I would want sort of just a normal horizontal menu. Okay, so that's where I would then use a media query. So we'll say at media minimum width 600. So I don't want this to kick in until 600 pixels. So for like a tablet. And once we're on a tablet, I'm going to want a normal horizontal menu. So in this case, I'm going to want the label with the attribute of 4. Okay. With the attribute of 4 to be, again, for Hamburg. And I want the ID that has that ID of Hamburg. I want both of these things to just not be there. Okay, so basically display none. So basically when the screen gets big enough, I want those gone. Okay, so we'll see here, like now if I make the screen bigger, I get 600 pixels, like that just disappears. So that's gone. But what I do want is I want this links to just be like another block. Okay. So in this case, we'll go in there and we'll say, okay, first I want links, and I'm going to change how that displays. I don't want it to be position fixed anymore. I want it to be position. Okay, what I wanted to do is just go back to, let's see here, unset. Okay, so it's going to unset the setting that it originally had. Okay. And then I want right unset because I don't want that setting that it has originally. Top unset. That should just unset everything. Put it back to like a normal block. Doesn't quite do it the way I'd like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just check it out, cover over it, and see what is still there. Unset, unset, unset. Yes, display block. Oh, because the width is still 30%. So we're going to change the width to 100%. Okay. But it's only 100% of the div that it's in. Okay, so what I want to do is also change the width of, because what it's in right now is it's still in this Hamburger div class. Okay, it's still in here. Okay, so in that case, I still want to make that wider than it currently is. Let me see, did I change that somewhere in particular? Yeah, so when I changed it here, I made that smaller because it's still position fixed. So I need to undo that as well. Okay, so what I can do is I can just apply this to both of them. So the class of Hamburger, because essentially I'm doing the same thing to both. I'm unsetting there, whatnot, and there we go. Okay, good. So now I see that I have like my desired effect. It doesn't look perfect, so we're gonna work on that. But now I can just focus on targeting like my links class by itself. And what I would like to do is maybe give it a width of 90%. Okay, a margin of auto, so that way it's centered. Perfect. And then those links, I want those words to be, vertical. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to display it as flex. Okay, and see now those are all vertical, but you see they're all scrunched up to the left. So when I have a flex, I can use justify content to kind of make those spaced a little bit better. So I'm going to use space between. That'll space those out nice and evenly. Okay, now I have a nice navigation bar. And again, I might want to style this some more, line up that title a little bit more so that way it's more lined up with where that menu is. But again, here are the links. And again, if the page is smaller, the hamburger menu comes back. But then when the screen is bigger, okay, we have just like a normal menu. And essentially, I've achieved that without using any JavaScript, okay, by just taking advantage of the checked status on a checkbox that I can make disappear and associate it with a label to kind of show what I want to be sort of the control. And by doing that, you can really make a lot of things more interactive using checkboxes purely from CSS. Okay, this is like, you can make all sorts of things appear and disappear or respond to just from CSS if you wanted to by using invisible checkboxes. Okay, but that's one cool application of this sort of approach. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. My name is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. Have a great day and enjoy.